It's a very nice hat you're wearing in the thumbnail today, John. That's a nice hat too. I hope you had a good Thanksgiving yesterday. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Jason. Good to see you. And yes, I think the thumbnail is quite spectacular this week.
I like it.
Seems
It
like,
made me
yeah,
laugh when I
yeah.
made it.
So it's not an outfit that I get to wear often, but
Hmm. Well, I hope we don't get into trouble for cultural appropriation. Oh no, I just hit something. Okay, I think we're all right. I hope we don't get into trouble for cultural appropriation. I'm in a impromptu studio here, so certain things need to happen. But John, I don't get into this cultural appropriation because by that measure, the only people who should be allowed to make movies are old French guys and people from New Jersey. So, I mean, if you like Mexican food, start a Mexican restaurant. If you like African garb, you're free to wear it. Of course, this is just a meme that I created to illustrate that you, John, have been pointing out for over a year that multiple countries in Africa, some with over 100 million in population, have far fewer deaths than even the least populous states here in the US. And we haven't gotten a good explanation as to how that could be possible or why nobody in the United States is studying that. And then today, almost out of nowhere, we have this Omicron strain, which reminds me of like the Transformers or something. But what is going on here?
oh well, it appears that we have a new variant, and this new variant is coming out of Botswana in southern Africa. So it's not South Africa, it's southern Africa, the nation of Botswana. And in tonight's show, both on YouTube and Rumble and all the different platforms that we stream on, Odyssey, Library, right? You're crowdsource the truth on Odyssey and crowdsource the truth on Library, which is kind of the same thing. And then you're also on Rumble. And
Yes.
I'm not streaming on Rumble, but you're streaming on Rumble. And we're streaming on YouTube all simultaneously right now. And we're streaming on Crowdsource the Truth and Johnny Hoover and John Cullen Investigates, right? So we're
We should
casting quite
be.
a net.
I'm
We're
doing my
casting
best
casting
to
quite the
keep all
net.
these
Yeah.
platforms going.
So we got a lot of this going on, and what we're going to examine tonight. If you want to go to the bottom line up front in the deck, we'll show the audience sort of the bottom line. What are we going to get into tonight with Africa? Why am I dressed this way in the thumbnail? We're going to go to Africa. I've been talking about Africa for quite some time. One of my favorite videos that I published is only available on Rumble, and that is Africa versus America's Blacks, and it has less than 1,500 views, and it's one of my favorites. And I published it a couple months ago in response to something that the vice president said, and I saw it just a second ago. If you go back, yeah, just hit your back button. It was right there. The
There
first
we
one.
go.
That's it. Yeah. So yeah, it's got less than 1,500 views, I think. And this video examines this claim that the vice president made, which is that we know that Black people are more likely or disproportionately likely to contract the virus and die from it. And so we looked at the statistics of population of Black people in America versus how many people died with coronavirus. And then I went to Africa and I looked at Nigeria and Ethiopia. And these are the two most populated countries in Africa to explore how many people have died there. So if the vice president was correct and Black people were disproportionately likely to contract the virus and die from it, nations that are almost 100% Black should be devastated by the virus.
You would think.
So, right. So I went to the map at Johns Hopkins and explored Nigeria and Ethiopia. And what I found was that Nigeria had fewer people dead than Connecticut. What? Nigeria has 200 million people. How does it have fewer people dead than Connecticut? And keep in mind, Nigeria is a real country, and we're not talking about just Lagos. I'm talking about the whole country, Nigeria. So
Yeah.
Lagos is a huge city with like 20 million or some big, big number. But the country of Nigeria over 200 million people. So I couldn't really understand this. I couldn't understand how this could be. And I started exploring this months ago. And in tonight's show, we're going to look at Botswana. We're going to look at Ethiopia, Kenya, Nigeria, and we're going to look at the numbers and we're going to compare them to the states. Now, you've got the other guy in the thumbnail. That's not Fred Munster. That's the governor of Vermont.
Right.
In the thumbnail. That looks,
he does look
like Fred Gwynn.
Yeah,
it looks like Fred Gwynn, also known as Fred Munster from The Munsters,
Car
one of my favorite shows.
Where are you?
Can you show people that thumbnail and the governor there? There you go. So, yeah, to me, he looks like Fred Munster in a tie. But that's the governor of Vermont. And right now, a lot of the news is about Vermont and the fact that there's some cockamamie pin that looks like a panda bear.
Well, what is that pin? I've looked at a lot of pictures of this guy, and he seems to be always wearing that lapel pin, but I couldn't make it out. So I wanted to zoom in on it. If anybody's from Vermont or knows what that guy is wearing, I'd be curious to know.
It's like a panda bear to me. But he's the governor of Vermont. Interestingly, Vermont and New Hampshire are the only two states in the United States that elect a governor every 2 years, not every 4. So Vermont and New Hampshire are unique in that way. And he has been the governor of Vermont for some time, and Vermont has the highest vaccination rate in the country. So the question is, if they have the highest vaccination rate in the country, why are their cases going up? And we're going to explore that tonight on the show. So we're going to go to Worldometers. When we get into our patron-only hour, we're going to look at the numbers in Vermont and compare Vermont to Nigeria, Vermont to Botswana. And we're going to look at this. Yes. And we're going to look at this new strain, this Omicron strain. And we're going to share with the audience something that's very special, very unique. And this sort of taps into some of your background and your expertise in 3D. Now, you specialize in 3D film. We're going to share with the audience tonight a 3D model of the Omicron spike protein and show the audience the aspects of this when we go to our patron-only hour. This is unique. You're not going to see this on the news. You're not going to see this anywhere else on YouTube because I filmed it. And this is using the 3D modeling technology.
Well, you rendered it.
Well, no, it was rendered. I'm moving my mouse around and zooming, and we're going to look at different aspects of the spike protein, the furin cleavage site, and all this other stuff. And these are the different things that have happened to the spike protein over time. So you're seeing variant with documented effects, various insertions and deletions, and then some things that were not documented. So, for example, and again, we zoom into all kinds of aspects of this, and you're going to see this when we go patron only. So this is in 3D. It's a model you're not going to see anywhere else on the internet.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
Excellent. You're always putting together such great data visualizations, John. I think that's what people have come to appreciate. And regular viewers of Crowdsource the Truth know that every Friday you and I are doing the sponsor exclusive show. It's coming up right after this, just about 20 minutes from now. People can watch on subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen, patreon.com/IamJohnCullen, and subscribestar.com and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. John, did you know that people can get holiday gift subscriptions for friends and family on Subscribestar? So if people are interested in a holiday gift subscription, they can contact me on truth@crowdsourcethetruth.org. They can also visit crowdsourcethetruth.com and sponsor the Counter Lawfare Fund. There's all kinds of options in there for annual stuff. And I think you can give annual subscriptions as well. We talk about that offline. If anybody's interested in an annual gift subscription, just send an email and we'll take care of that.
Great. I was glancing at the comments and I saw that Ida was saying that, they probably don't count people that died in a car accident with COVID as a COVID death in Nigeria.
In Africa, maybe not.
Yeah. And that's probably true. And that's probably what Dr. Birx meant when she said that we take a very liberal approach to mortality. So let me show our YouTube audience and our Rumble audience a little bit about what we're going to get into when we go patron only. But first, it is Thanksgiving. Brian Adams has tested positive for COVID for the second time in a month.
When did we get this new Brian Adams? It's like the Spider-Man multiverse. This is not the Brian Adams that I know about.
No. But, there's a lot of people that really dislike Brian Adams for all kinds of reasons. They make a lot of fun of him on South Park and whatever. Yeah, same Brian Adams. It's the same guy.
Is it the same one?
You don't recognize him. Yeah, it's the same guy. He just different haircut.
So who was doing the Robin Hood song with Sting?
Yeah. Oh. So he's tested positive for COVID for the second time. And he's was fully vaccinated back when fully vaccinated meant having 2 shots. So the fact that he's gotten it now 2 times, there's so many people that dislike him. This is one of those, yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus kind of moments if you're not a fan of Brian Adams. But
why do people dislike him?
I don't know. It's just like a whole thing. It's like, believe me, there's like a whole world. Yeah, exactly. A whole bunch of people don't like Brian Adams. So he's tested positive for COVID twice, despite having been inoculated. Let's go to our next slide.
Wow. He's Canadian.
Yes. All right. So right now the news is disaster. Wall Street shattered. The Dow has the worst thing ever. Looks like Putin's getting ready to take over the Ukraine. Stephen Sondheim died. So, it's horrible. But the big thing has to do with this variant. And if you go to the next page, the headlines on Drudge Report right now are about this Botswana variant coming out of Africa, and that this is the Omicron variant, and that they're very, very concerned about this. Now, I believe they've identified 10 cases so far, and the United States just limited travel from 8 countries in Africa with 10 cases. So we want to explore. It's typical. So we're going to explore this further when we go to our patron only hour. And I think I sent you the link. You're going to drive live, and we're going to look at the variants in the GIS aid system, and we're going to look at Omicron. And this, again, is the sort of thing you're not going to see done on television. You're not going to see anybody else doing this on YouTube. This is where we're going
this at home.
Yeah, I mean, we're going into the actual systems, and I'm going to guide us to Botswana, and we're going to look at the Omicron variant and when was it discovered, where is it here on the screen, and we're going to do this live with Jason driving. That's awesome. Yeah, so we're going to do this live, and Botswana is just north of South Africa. So if you go to the tip of South Africa, Botswana is the country just above it. And if you go back to my deck, I've got a couple photos before we go to our patron only hour. I want to familiarize people with Botswana. People, what the hell is Botswana? Why is it in the news? Where is Botswana? What's it famous for? So if we go back to my deck, here's sort of the disaster news. This is Drudge Report earlier today. Omicron sinks stocks, new travel bans. Is it vax resistant? Oh my God.
I mean, they just were 0 to 1,000 on the panic scale in one day.
It's my favorite. I love this kind of stuff, right? Remember when George Carlin said, this is the kind of stuff I live for, right? This is entertaining. So what we want to do is break this down, right? Remember when Axios had their interview with the president, and they accused President Trump of not being concerned enough about COVID.
Jonathan Swan.
Yeah, Jonathan Swan said, you don't seem like you're that, you're not as upset as you should be, or something like that. I'm paraphrasing, of course. And I feel very much the same way. In other words, I should be panic stricken by this news, yet I'm not. And I want to explain to the audience again why it is that this doesn't strike panic in me. And I don't know if the former president, has the same rationale. I'm hoping we'll find out in the not too distant future. So why don't we go to the next slide of my deck, and let me show you sort of a little bit more before we go patron only, because we've only got a couple more minutes here.
Yeah.
All right. So super variant puts Southern Africa at risk of global shutout. From discovery to global panic in 48 hours. It emerged in an HIV patient.
Question, though. That's a question. See, that's what's interesting,
Ooh.
John, is that I heard all of this throughout the day, and then I was just watching, like, I don't know, CNBC or MSNBC right before we came on, and they're saying that, they don't know if it's vaccine resistant, and they don't know this, and they don't know that. So I guess it's always safe to err on the side of panic, right?
Mm-hmm. If you look at the third line from the bottom, CDC director lauded success of China's really strict policies. Does it sound like they're starting to admit that China doesn't have 5,000 people dead?
Well, I mean, again, they're never going to admit that. They've got very sort of cheeky
they're
ways
lauding their success. We'll dig into this next week. We'll look at this next week. But right now, the news is Omicron, stock market crashes. Even Russia Today, this new variant is the worst one so far, according to the BBC. And David Hawkins will tell you that if the BBC says so, it's got to be true. So we know this has to be the worst one ever so far. So we're going to look at this variant, and we've got this thing live. We got it queued up on Jason's computer. So we're going to look at the Botswana strain. Let's go one or two more slides before we have to go to our patron-only thing.
Nice socks.
One of the things we talk about here is how, we go by thickness. And when people accuse me of wearing different color socks, to me, it's about the weave, right? It's about, I don't really care the color. What the hell is the color? And they feel the same on my left foot and my right foot, regardless of color. It's more about the weave, the thickness. That's what I mean when I say we go by thickness. I don't care what color they are. That's irrelevant to me. In fact, I kind of like the red and green port and starboard thing. So when I say we go by thickness, it's a metaphor. And it's a metaphor for, but it was used at sea before we had airplanes. Remember that? Same with your compass rose that you see at the CIA.
I should have known that.
It's been used at sea for hundreds of years before we had airplanes. But not
red and green, was it?
Yes, of course. Port and starboard.
How do they have lights hundreds of years ago?
They used candles. Yeah.
Red and green.
And oil lamps, actually. Oil lamps. So when I say we go by thickness, it's a metaphor. Thank you, Stephen Wright. For we here have been measuring different things. In other words, when the mainstream media was looking at cases, we were looking at deaths. When they were looking at Italy and France, we were looking at Vietnam and Cambodia. Right? So we've been measuring different things. And so if we go to the next slide, one of the reasons I tend to not panic through all this is because there's also this Kodiak bear on the loose. And when I testified to Larry Klayman's grand jury, the thing that I tried to explain to everybody was that in early 2020, before COVID showed up, over 4,000 people a week were dying from influenza, P&I, in the USA. COVID's in green. COVID didn't even, make its appearance until week 11 or 12
to move
in the USA
needle.
As far as deaths. So what happens over the course of the next couple of weeks in the USA in 2020, early 2020, next slide, is you've got an outbreak of influenza, and then along comes COVID. But the influenza doesn't just disappear. And this argument that one pushes out the other is only when you're talking about the same virus. So one influenza will push out another influenza, and one strain of COVID will push out another strain of COVID. But saying that one strain of COVID is going to push out influenza has nothing to do with each other. They're not from the same tree of viruses. So what we have here are two infections. Right? We've said before, people can come into the hospital with a SARS-CoV-2 infection and HPV and zoster virus and tuberculosis. There's no reason why you can't have multiple infections at the same time. And that's what the data shows from the CDC, is that people were dying from both COVID and influenza. But influenza had 4,000 people a week dying before COVID showed up. And when we go to the next slide, the CDC tells us that really 5% of the almost 800,000 people died with just SARS-CoV-2.
They don't want to
95%
talk
had
about
four.
that.
Right. And that the number one comorbidity by far is influenza PNI, with 374,000 of the almost 800,000 people that have died dying with both coronavirus and influenza. And this was the subject of the Atlantic article that we showcased last week. There's an article in the Atlantic, the title of which is The Double Whammy COVID-Flu. And this was a watershed article because this is really the first time that we've seen any of the mainstream media, let alone the Queen Bee's mechanism, right? So this is Laurene Powell Jobs magazine. And for her to publish this is huge. All right. So this notion of co-infections happening all the time, it says that 1 in 8 of cases had both. 1 in 8 cases had both influenza and COVID. But when we get to deaths, it's almost 50%.
Wow.
And we've been documenting that here on the show. So that's why when I hear about a new particular strain, I mean, we looked at what was the deadliest strain on Earth at one time was Lambda, when Peru had the highest deaths per capita.
So what happened to that?
Right?
They were freaking about that for a day and then...
Well, you and I dug into it, and it turned out that whatever they did in Peru really set it aside. In other words, people stopped dying. So Peru has kind of capped at 200,000 people. And what we're going to do is take the same methodology that we've been applying to Peru and Vietnam and Cambodia and Laos and Thailand and all the stuff we've been looking at to date. And now we're going to go back to Africa. And we're going to look at Nigeria, Ethiopia, Kenya, Egypt, and we're going to look at Botswana. And if you go 1 or 2 more slides on my deck, I want to show people the photos from Botswana, and then we got to cut over because I think we've only got another minute. So yeah, here's our Botswana variant. We're going to do this live. 1 more slide, and I think 1 or 2 more slides, we get some photos. Keep going until you get to a photo of Botswana.
That's
I want
China.
to show people. There you go. That's the Okavango Delta. And this is one of the most amazing places on earth. If you want to go on stuff. No, I've been to South Africa. I've been to right near Kruger. I've been to a place called Sabi Sands. But the Botswana area, I mean, this is one of the great safari destinations in the world. It's spectacular. You can show people 1 or 2 more pictures, and then I think we have to cut over. So Botswana is a place where it is one of the least densely populated countries. I think it is the least densely populated country in all of Africa. So the fact that this strain is coming from here, there's 10 cases, and we're shutting down travel from 8 nations in Africa, is just another example of
stupidity,
questionable responses to. It's like, who's making these decisions?
It looks like Namibia is the least populated country, least densely populated.
So we're going to explore Botswana. We're going to look at, what's happening here. We're going to look at this variant. What is the story? We're going to look at the spike protein. You're going to see some video footage that nobody's seen in the world. This is exclusive footage exploring the 3D spike protein. And what are some of the variant? Why is everybody freaking out about that? And that's tonight's show.
It's going to be great. I want to encourage people to join us on subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen, patreon.com/IamJohnCullen, and subscribestar.com and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. We are going to be on there in just about 5 minutes, John, so people have some time to get over there now. And as I mentioned earlier, people can now get holiday gift subscriptions for friends and family members. Don't forget to subscribe to the John E. Hoover YouTube channel. Check out Rumble. Check out Odyssey as well. And we'll see everybody in just a few minutes on Subscribestar and Patreon. I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving yesterday. And we'll see you in 5 minutes.